Welcome, everyone, to this week's Human on the Verge podcast. My guest today is Genpo Roshi, a Zen master. You'll hear his full introduction in a moment, but I thought I'd give you a little background on some things he'll mention in case you're not familiar with some terms or ideas that we talk about. Whenever you talk to a Zen master, you're going to talk about ego and you're going to talk about the non-dual. And what do we mean by that? So ego is a construct of like dualistic thinking, right? In the world of Zen Buddhism, of Buddhism in general, of mysticism, there's two ways we see the world, both through our duality, where there's wrong and right, good and bad, good and evil, black and white, all sorts of dualistic ideas. And then there's this non-dual space where when Genpo and I talk about it, we talk about something called big mind. That's a Zen term. And that is a place where there is no duality. There's no tension of the opposites. That's the place we all want to get to. That's like nirvana. That's that thing. So that's what we're talking about when we start to talk about that. And ego's tricky because there's psychological versions of ego and there's Buddhism. And well, we'll get into that in lots of episodes coming up this year. The other thing I wanted to mention is a word we talk about, which is shadow. Shadow is this part of our personality, part of the way we look at the world that we're unconscious of. It's the parts of us that we're unconscious of. Feelings, ideas, worldviews, emotions, all sorts of things. Unconscious, we call them shadow parts. Carl Jung came up with this term. He was one of the big pioneers of the unconscious mind, a psychology that explores the unconscious. So shadow was a big thing for him. And why Genpo and I talk about shadow is because we're talking about the ways that humans, when we don't like a part of ourselves or we don't like an aspect of ourselves, we put it in the basement. We put it in the shadow. We don't have a relationship with it. But what happens when we do that is we project it out into the world, and thus the mess we have today. So anyway, that's just a little bit of taste. Just wanted to prep you before we started. I hope you enjoy today's show. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Humans on the Verge. My guest today is someone who I've known almost 20 years, which I can't even begin to, I can't even imagine that's a truth, but that's how fast time goes by. My first guest is Genpo Roshi. Now, Genpo was born in California as Dennis Merzel. But he began studying Zen Buddhism in 1973 with the renowned Japanese Zen master Taizan Maizumi Roshi at the LA Zen Center. Genpo Roshi is known for his development of something called the big mind process. It's a method that combines Zen practice with a Western psychological process technique called voice dialogue. For those of you who are familiar with shadow work, this is a form of shadow work. And it facilitates very quickly profound personal insight and transformation. It's a pretty goddamn powerful technique. There's some people who've talked about what Genpo does. Lama Surya Das, a very famous, well-known Buddhist teacher, says that Genpo's groundbreaking approach offers us one of the best cutting-edge tools sprung from the merging of both Eastern and Western thought. Michael Zimmerman, a former Chief Justice of the Utah Supreme Court, mentions that this technique helps to shift perspectives easily and to see the world from another's point of view, which is an essential skill that has the potential to enhance every aspect of our lives. And the thing about Big Mind is that it is like a springboard for like an evolutionary leap of thinking. And here at Humans on the Verge, that's what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about collective evolution, personal evolution, transformation. I mean, we're all on the verge of something, whether the species or the personal. And so this is why I wanted to start this podcast new series with this topic. I met Roshi and started attending his workshops somewhere in the mid-2000s after hearing an audio recording of him walking a group of people, including the pretty famous integral theorist Ken Wilber, into the mind of the Buddha in about 20 minutes. It was an incredible recording, and I too made it into the mind of the Buddha by just listening to this audio recording. I had been someone who was a student of Vipassana and Zen, practice through Thich Nhat Hanh's world. And I'd certainly had a few glimpses of this unconditional mind space or even unconditional heart space, but nothing that I could actually step into in a way that was more direct. It was always a really half-assed chance moment for me. The Big Mind technique, just to get this out of the way so we don't have to describe it much, is really this technique that works with something called voice dialogue. And some of you listeners might be familiar with this kind of work because it's super, super kind of famous right now with Richard Schwartz's internal family systems work. Of course, Carl Jung and active imagination started all of this, working directly with figures in the unconscious. These are all things that I use in my work and have studied over the last 25, 30 years. And the way this kind of active imagination, voice dialogue, family systems, internal family systems works is it approaches aspects of our unconscious parts and selves within us. But what Roshi has done is to use this technique to not only work on kind of the shadow parts of the ego, like when you go to your therapist, that's kind of what you're working on is the parts of you that the inner critic or the inner child, things like that. But Roshi has created a way for us to talk to one of the biggest aspects of the ego shadow, which is the transcendent self. This is a huge breakthrough in this kind of technology. And as you know, this transcendent mind is something that mystics, including Buddhists, have been seeking for millennia. And so here we are at the beginning of the 21st century with a technology to help us step into this transcendent mind. And I'm very excited. I've always been excited about this work, but I'm excited especially about this conversation today because, well, as we all know here in America, the shadow walked in about 8 years ago. The first time we all met Donald Trump coming down that escalator and declaring that he was going to be run for president of the United States. So we've been dealing with this shadow of America for quite a while here. And so today, Genpo and I are going to talk about this practice and, of course, this point of view. Welcome, Genpo. It is so nice to have you here.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you. Thank you. Let me just correct a couple of things.
Please do.
I wasn't born in California.
Oh, you weren't? I know you were raised. You were raised in Long Beach.
Yeah, I was raised here. I was raised there. I'm in Hawaii right now. So I was raised there. We got there before I turned even 10 months old.
Oh, okay.
So I was raised in Southern California, Boyle Heights.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And then Long Beach after.
Nice.
Yeah, that was the main thing. I also met Roshi in 72, not 73. I started the practice in 71, but I met Maizumi Roshi in 72, and I became a monk in 73.
Oh,
and I became a Buddhist in 73 and then a monk. So that's when 73.
And that's when you really committed to the path and the practice.
That's when I really committed to Roshi and the path. Yeah. Before that, it was just meditation.
And some psychedelics, maybe?
Oh, I did a lot of psychedelics. I did. You know, I think at one point I thought the only one that had more psychedelics was John Lennon than I had.
So there was a few moments of that.
There was lots of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and let's just start there because there you are. It's in the early 70s, and speaking about our culture being on the verge, I mean, the 60s really ushered in this counterculture, this human potential movement. A lot of Eastern thought was coming and landing literally in this country, with Maizumi Roshi in LA and
Suzuki Roshi in San
yeah,
Francisco. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And so we were on the verge 60 years ago with all of this,
Yeah.
and longer. But for you, there was a moment, I'm guessing that moment of committing to becoming a monk. I mean, talk about being on the verge. My God. And what a thing that you had to cross in order to get there.
It's funny you say that because the moment was crossing the street of Normandy, Normandy Avenue, at 5 a.m. in the morning, 10 to 5. We used to sit at 5, and I lived across the street, and I was walking. I just moved in, and I was walking to the Zendo, and in the middle of the street, I realized I must give up my autonomy, my power, my confidence, not my confidence, but my power to the lineage, to the teaching, and to the teacher. And I had to really give it all up, my ego, everything. And I was there for the long haul, whatever it took. And that was the moment that I committed to the path.
Yeah. And, I think about, any kind of edge we come up against personally in our life. There is that moment where we have to be willing to surrender some version of ourself in order to step into this unborn version of ourself at that point. It's just pure potential, right? I mean, we don't really know what's ahead of us. We just know something is calling us.
But
And
you just said a beautiful thing. I just don't want to forget it. So when you're talking about when you say some version, that's Kensho. Dai Kensho, great enlightenment, is all versions.
yeah. Yeah. So
Just to
it's
make it clear.
yeah. So the first version is kind of we're still getting to be a version of ourself. We haven't completely surrendered
Correct.
self or concept of self,
The
even.
whole concept of self,
Yeah.
knowing who we are.
Yes. Who we quote unquote really are, like the real deal.
Knowing, giving up who we believe and are convinced we are for that which we don't know and can't ever know. The unnameable.
God,
And
that's
it's a huge leap.
It's terrifying.
I'm working very closely with some students right now who are just either on the verge or just did it.
Wow. Yeah, I'd really say that this seeking mind that I have and that I work with so many people as you do who come in as seekers, like we're seeking that place. And yet it's always a hedging bet. Like we always keep a little bit of ourselves
Correct.
in the corner because, the thought of not having this personality, this persona. I mean, this is the, and we're kind of
Can
you and I like,
Can I butt in
yeah,
again?
please.
What would it take to give up the seeking mind?
Yeah, well,
Because that's your identity now.
yeah.
So it goes in stages like this. You've heard the old Zen saying, mountains are mountains and rivers are rivers. Once, at some point, mountains are no longer mountains, rivers are no longer rivers. And then eventually, once again, mountains are just mountains and rivers are just rivers. So the seeking mind brings us to the point where we have to give up even the seeking mind.
Yes.
For that to be mountains are no longer mountains. And then after some time, we have to come back to seeing life is just what it is. Mountains are mountains and rivers are rivers, and I'm Genpo and you're Kelly and all that. But
yes,
the seeking mind is what our difficulty is giving up. We have so much difficulty because it gives us meaning, it gives us purpose, it gives us direction, it gives us life itself once we have raised the seeking mind. Once that has come into being, we've given up the old mind, who we thought we were up to that moment, but then the new barrier is the seeking mind itself. How do we
Yes.
put an end to the ceaselessly seeking mind?
Well, and I think, this is what I think about all the time around where we're at as a species, right?
Yes, that's where we're at.
Yeah. Because, the only thing that's really, I believe, gets in our way is the hunger, the greed, the seeking, the idea that there's some place to get to.
Yes, absolutely.
And yet we are so steeped in it. Like most people, bottom line is most people don't sit around and think about this part of their mind or life. They just like wake up and they've got to pay the bills and they've got a job and they think they want to move up the ladder or maybe they want some prestige or power or these days it's all about worshiping billionaires, So the average person, but I really do think that, it's just so interesting because this is where traditional religion used to kind of check this a little bit for us, right? It used to be like, you got to live by some ethics and some morals, and there's these things called sins, and we got to take care of the lesser and the poor, and there's a sense of community in all of that.
Right.
But without those kind of guardrails, this experiment, it's careening down a mountain, it feels like right now.
Yeah.
So how do you sit with where we are? Like, let's just start as a nation right now, as America. Like, here we are on, the precipice of another term of a president who has really, startled and changed the course of this history of this country. And we are so divided as a collective here right now. How do you view all of that? What do you think's going on here?
Absolutely. It's perfect.
Says the Zen master.
It is the perfect moment, the perfect storm. So we didn't get here by accident. There's no accident. So this has been coming for quite some time. We had to get to such a polarization. That was a wake-up call, and I call it November 5th, 6th, because for me it was midnight in Hawaii. Then I really swallowed, okay, now I have to identify myself and become what I was resisting becoming in the voice work, Donald Trump. And so I did it that morning, and I saw what was going on. We became our shadow.
Yeah.
We have to own our shadow. The ownership, the affirmation that my shadow just got elected president of the United States, and the whole MAGA movement is my shadow. And we, not only physically in the physical realm, but spiritually in the spiritual realm, left half ourselves behind.
Mm-hmm.
We left people behind thinking we were superior. We are woke. We are awakened. We are conscious beings. We are into love. We're into peace. We're into all the good and right things. And those people who haven't awakened yet, haven't become conscious yet, are just into themselves and greed. And that's our shadow.
Yeah.
We're just as greedy as we ever were. We just buried it deeper. We're just as self-centered as we ever were. We just buried it deeper.
Yeah.
Our narcissism. The shadow exposed all our ugliness. And we have to own the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
We have to own it. So we have no choice now. We have no choice. We have to own our own shadow, within and without, because there's no in and out. Real, in reality. So we just externalize everything. So the shadow's out there now.
Yeah.
And I realize I left people behind. I realize that we kind of ignored all these people that are so against the system. I realize that, but let's do something for them. But we're not going to look in. We're not going to go into where the real problem is. I talked to some Zen masters recently. They didn't even get it.
Really?
Because they're
Wow.
not working on the shadow.
Yeah. Yeah. They're still in they're not owning that.
They're in the non-dual.
Yes.
We're all
right.
one. We have to
Right.
bring everybody in, but they're not working on their own shadow.
Yeah.
The work, to me, big mind goes way beyond the access of enlightenment.
Yes.
When I first started, that's what I realized. Oh my God. Because it started in 99 with me doing some work with one individual in a group of 80, 85 people. And I called it Zen dialogue because it was no longer voice dialogue. I had moved out of that since 83, 84, when I studied with Hal back then. But I called it Zen dialogue because we were going into the transcendent, into Zen. I was bringing Zen into the voice dialogue work. So I had to rename it at some point. So I called it Zen dialogue. And I asked this guy to speak to Big Mind. I asked him to speak. May I speak to Big Mind? He said, yes. I said, I'm speaking. Big Mind. I said, okay, look in and find out when you look in just how big you are. Well, I'm sizeless. I can't find any size. Okay. Tell me what color you are. I know color. Colorless. I can't find any color. I'm all colors. I don't know. I can't find a color. I said, how old are you? Oh my God. Oh my God. I can't find anybody there. I can't find anyone with an age. I'm ageless. I don't even know if I've been born or died. I'm ageless. Have I been born? And I realized in that moment, I had been working with people since 73. And he really got it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In that second, he really got it. He's a master now.
Well, and what's so interesting about that piece of it, like you were saying, and when you teach this and when we do the technique with you, there's the leap we make over here into big mind and big heart. But I know that, 75% of the work we do with you is working on these shadow parts of ourself that none of us want to talk to.
Or look at, or even admit.
Or even admit or acknowledge.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly the problem.
Yeah.
We don't want to admit or acknowledge it. We don't want to. And that's our job. If we really are courageous, and if we're really warriors, we have to face our own shadow. I'm at a place now where I really can see what Buddha was really teaching. I've been doing this for 54 years or whatever.
Yep.
And I really see when he said to free oneself is like fighting 100 enemies single-handedly in battle, and conquering them, because it is that kind of war within. And we don't want to go into this war with ourselves. There is these two aspects of ourselves always at play. Should I, should not? Do I? Should I take that food? No. Should I go there? No. This whole battle. And we don't want to face that battle. We don't want to face it.
Well, and what's so interesting, though, is for those of us who are willing to, and I'm hoping that the people who are listening to this podcast are here because they're curious and they are seekers and they are doing some of this work. But what I have found in doing shadow work is there's two things that happen. First of all, there's the idea of speaking to these parts of ourselves. Let's just say the greed. Let's just use the shadow voice of greed, right? Perfect. It's the perfect one because it's kind of culminates. Yes. And it culminates everything, what's wrong with the system and all that kind of stuff. And when I think about it, like, I don't want to talk to the voice of greed. Like that's right. That's like the worst part of humanity. And that's what that's why we are in the way we are. And those people I hate are the greedy ones and all of that. But then when we are willing to, and this is a very Christian thing, to stand in the shoes of the voice of greed, or stand in the shoes of anyone, our neighbor, our enemy, whoever it is. I mean, this is where Christ's teachings were so beautiful in this way. But the minute we step into that shadow and let that aspect of ourself speak from its truth, it is a very, very different experience. There may be a little resistance that shows up, but if we let the resistance kind of be at bay and, okay, you stay over there, let me go in and just really look through the eyes of this.
And walk in the moccasins.
We see that, there are gradations of this energy that we call greed, but that at some elemental level, without this desire for more or hunger, we probably would have never gotten out of the caves.
Exactly.
To kill anything, to eat anything.
So the extra is we label the greed bad.
Yeah.
Or good. Another one is power.
Right.
Right? Another word for power, if I translate power in Sanskrit, some may disagree with this translation, it's dharma.
Oh, that's interesting.
Dharma has many translations.
Yes.
And one of them is teaching, and one of them is reality, and one of them is truth, right? But one of them is phenomena. But in all of them, we have to come into our own power to be empowered. And that power that we have to come into is already within us. But we don't want to access it. We're dying to access it, but we've labeled it bad and terrible. And so we're not willing to own our own power.
Right, which means that we're always either projecting it onto other people or handing it off to other people. Yeah,
handing it over.
Yeah.
Or thinking I'm the one empowered.
Yes.
That's another one. Then it's no longer dharma.
Right.
There's just power. We're one with power. It's not I have power or you have power. That's when it's still very disowned. But you are just power. Energy. Pure. One.
Yes. It's like power is some sort of directed energy towards something. Like,
that's right.
In order for something to grow or to move or to be built, right. Or it needs an energy of power. Yeah.
Maybe it's all energy.
Maybe it is. I mean, well, that's what they say, right? That's what the physicists say.
That's what I would say. It's all energy.
Yeah.
It's all one energy. We label it all kinds of things, but it's pure.
The 10,000 names.
I call it mind. I prefer mind. But I
Yes.
don't mean the little mind, the thinking mind. I mean mind, big mind.
Yeah, it's interesting because in Jungian psychology and like imaginal psychology, we talk a lot about the psyche and that the psyche is not within us. We are in psyche all the time. Something is always generative. There is a generative field that we live in. It's just a different word for energy, but it's,
Yeah.
it's like
We
we
are
are just,
psyche. Yeah.
yeah,
We
yeah,
are there.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I wonder if you've ever thought about this because, you know,
Probably.
I know you have because I know you also have, you've talked to these integral people also, and you
Yeah.
understand that world. And I'm going to have Steve McIntosh on next month talking about developmental politics and stuff like that. So one of the things that is interesting about the quote unquote woke people, right? The far left, the progressives, whatever you want to call it, is, it is this postmodern thinking where they are willing to step into the shoes of everybody, right? They want everyone to have a voice and everyone gets a turn to share their experience with the world. And what's so interesting is that even in of itself, how beautiful that was. And it was really born in the counterculture and through all of that kind of thinking. It's reached its own limit, though, of kind of functionality inside of our world, because that perspective, even though it says it's willing to step in everyone's shoes, it's not willing to step into the very people that they are opposing, which is how this divided this country is. It's so fascinating to me how this
I told you it's an amazing time.
Yeah, the blind spot of that.
I've been so excited since the midnight of the 5th, 6th. It's an amazing time. I wouldn't do the voice of Trump. I did it 8 years ago with people. I did it. I wouldn't do it this time. And you know why? Every time I started, I go, oh no, this is just too dark. And I made that distinction. Even after all these years of training and practice, I still did it. I got caught. So I couldn't foresee completely what would happen. I couldn't see. I could see something big will happen. And I've been waiting for this transition because I knew we were through the middle of the tunnel. We're in a transition, right? We're into a completely new consciousness.
Yep.
Worldwide. And it was a worldwide wake-up call. So if you compare this with the world, with the individual, we had the raising of the Bodhi mind, which is the first mountains, are no longer mountains, but only the first. We had a beginning. Now we have to wake up to what we left behind. And now is a time where there's going to be some real movement, but it's not going to always be pretty.
Yeah.
Because what that does is we go into a kind of chaos, and we have to own chaos. We have to be willing to go into chaos ourselves, as well as the world. That's harder, because we see that as more real than within.
Yes.
But there's no real distinction.
There's no distinction, right? Yes. Yeah.
Right? So we have to be willing to step into that which we fear the most, complete chaos. And we're on our way. And it's going to be quite a ride.
Yeah.
But we have to go into it, and we have to own it. And the moment we can own it on an individual, so I imagine it's the same on a global level, then we move on to the next complete freedom, complete liberation.
Yeah, I think I do remember in one of the sessions with you, we might have stepped into the voice of chaos with you. Yeah, I know we certainly did.
We did. Yeah,
I know we certainly
did
did
that a lot.
Yeah, and we did Insanity also
that's right.
once,
big
which
voices.
Was
that's right.
Really, really big voices we did. And it was a pretty advanced group, and it was an amazing session to do that.
Yeah.
And so, but we were well prepared because we kind of know how to step into these voices and things like that. How how can people who are curious about what you and I are talking about sitting with some of these voices, how can we, first of all, everyone's into wellness and making sure that our nervous system is well regulated nowadays, right? That's the whole thing. Because we all did spend the last 8 years pretty unregulated, and we all got kind of trauma response through all of this. What are a couple of things that people can do to center themselves, but then also to be willing to kind of step into these other shadowy points of view?
Well, a number of things come up. First of all, we have to commit. We have to commit ourselves to something. And why not commit to our life? Our true life. Yeah. Well, we have to commit. So however that looks for the people on this call, you have to commit to something. Now, hopefully, whatever you commit to is bigger than yourself.
Yes.
So I committed myself to what I call the Buddha Dharma, Sangha, the three treasures. And that was commitment to this lineage and to this practice. But we have to commit. And we have to be brave, because we're going to face some real stuff, real shadows that are monstrous. I mean, in all the teachings, and they talk about the Mara and the things that arose and when Buddha was trying to sit, that's not, lies. All that stuff comes up. Everything comes up. There are dragons and there are demons, all in our own mind, of course, but it's all in our own mind. So we have to be willing to face that and commit to it. And then we have to throw ourselves into it. So we have to be willing to give ourselves away. Now, the thing is, once we raise that Bodhi mind, now the rest of it is kind of dropping it. The Bodhi mind gets us, that's the raft that gets us to the first shore. And then we have to leave that raft behind to make the journey to on the other shore. Now, of course, there are not two shores.
Right.
Of course, they're not two shores. We're already on the other shore. But we have to take that raft. We have to make that journey thinking there's another shore to find out that shore and this shore are one shore. But we have to be willing to leave the raft behind. And that was the seeking mind.
Right.
And maybe we're in the seeking mind 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, 60 years, 70 years. Because that's given us, as I said earlier, it's given us purpose, it's given us mission, it's given us direction, it's given us life itself. Yours and my life is completely based on that mind.
Yep.
The seeking mind. To give all that up means I have no clue who I am. I am completely clueless. I'm no longer the seeker. In fact, I found out that by the seeking all the time, I'm never the arriver.
Exactly.
I never arrive. I'm so identified as a seeker, I don't even know what it means to be there, to be home. I keep looking for home, and I'm home.
Yep, absolutely. The mind-blowing moment of really seeking mind is when you ask the question, well, what if you find what you're seeking for? What happens next? And then the seeking mind says, oh, I just go seeking for the next thing.
Yeah, exactly. That's what the seeking mind does. And then doesn't even recognize I got there.
No. And doesn't even like recognize that
this is it.
It's like it's just endless all the time. Yeah. It's so interesting because this letting go of seeking mind, and yet being inside of a world that is constructed, the shared reality is constructed by seeking mind. That feels, for me, and it's really where I've been the last 5 years, Roshi, I feel the tension of both of these places, and I feel the surrendering, and then the constructed reality, pulls me back in the minute my eyes open, right? And I look around, and it feels for me, I think my fear is that if I were to fully surrender into, what I call the self with a capital S, that's the Jungian version of this, right? It's the deep imagination, it's full psyche. I feel like there's going to be such a loneliness there. And so that keeps me from feeling like.
Why don't we, I can't stand this. Why don't we just do it? Let me speak to that voice.
To the voice of the non-seeking mind?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
But let's first talk to the seeking mind.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay.
So, because that's what you're identified as, right?
Yeah. So seeking mind is here for sure.
Okay.
I can feel it.
So you are the seeking mind.
100%.
100%.
Yes.
So who is she?
Seeking mind?
No, who is she?
Oh, who is she?
Yeah, Kelly. Who's she?
She's kind of like a vehicle for me, I guess. She's a.
Can you see her? Can you find her?
Well, I mean, I can see a constructed version of her.
Yeah, but it's not real. It's not her.
No.
You can't find her. Why can't you find her?
Well, because the minute I find her, I don't think I've found her. And so I go seeking for some version of her somewhere else.
You are her.
Oh, because I am her as the seeking mind.
Yeah, you can't see her. That's like seeing your own eyes.
That is true.
Absolutely true.
Yeah.
So what would you have to give up to stop being the seeking mind?
I'd have to give up, well, lots of things, but mostly the prize at the end of seeking that I think I'm going to get.
I don't say there is no Zen, but there are no Zen teachers. And nobody can do that for you.
Right.
You have to give that up.
Yes. And when I think that I have to give that up, then I think I will be annihilated.
That's right.
And
that's why we don't.
Yes, because annihilation
is the ego.
It's death. It's a form of death, for sure.
It's a form of death, but it's ego death, or death to the self. We have to die once. After we've been born, of course, if we were born, if there's any birth, right?
Right.
Because not so sure. But if we were born, we have to die. If we were never born, then we don't have to die.
Right.
And what we are giving up into is the one that was never born.
Yes.
That's called the true self. But that's what you'd have to give up. And I'm not going to push you to give that up today.
Yes.
But that's what we all have to give up, because we find ourselves back on the 100-foot pole. Every time we give it up, what's next? I'm back on.
Yep.
So it becomes moment by moment by moment, constantly shedding this identity. Now, whatever the new identity is, I keep forming new identities every day.
Yes.
That's why people say, oh, God, it's exhausting being around you. My sister told me just the other day, yeah, Dennis, you can come, but no longer than 2 weeks, please. I said, why? She said, I can't take it anymore. The energy's too much.
So, and so that is the thing about it, is that we wake up, we shed, and then immediately the crust starts back on again. And we have to then wake up to the crust is back so that we can shed.
Yeah. And there's a fast way to do that. Just give up the ceaselessly seeking mind, the conceptual mind. Yes. The mind that always is making another thing to seek, another thing to grab hold of. Just the whole good and bad, right and wrong, that whole concept of high, low, good, bad, right, wrong, this, that, you, me, light and diluted. Give it all.
Okay, so then this is, I hear you. Yes,
Yeah.
and this is where people go, two different people go there.
Yeah.
There's the spiritual bypass people who just
Yeah.
want to hang out in
That's right.
bliss.
That's
And
right.
I'm not going to deal with anything.
That's right.
And then there's the people that say, but there is real evil in the world. You know, the genocide in Gaza is
Absolutely. And they're both true.
Right.
They're both true. Why do we have to make a distinction? Right, wrong. You know, I was driving on this narrow road down here yesterday, going from Manini to whatever, Two Steps. You're probably familiar with the island.
A little bit, yeah.
I'm on the big island, okay, and I'm up in Captain Cook. And I'm driving this one road, very narrow road, and there was a car coming on. And I had this thought, should I pull over or he pull over? Because one of us has to pull over. And I thought, well, I have the right of way. I'm on the right side. And then it dawned on me, he has the right of way. He's on the right side. So who's on the right side of this? And then he pulled over, and I won.
Oh my!
It was funny. It was funny. I'm going to do a cartoon with my nephew, the cartoonist. It's so bizarre. But that's what it is.
Yeah.
We're like passing, and we both have the right of way. But
Yes.
we think, oh, I have the right of way because I'm on the right side. But of course he's on the right side too.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Which side is the right side?
Yeah. So as we end here today, what will you be practicing this year? How are you going to be being in relationship with what goes on politically, what goes on in your personal life? Like, is there an approach here that you're going to take that's different from anything you've been doing?
Well, I do think, as far as I know, there are not too many in my world, Buddhist world, that have been practicing shadows as long as we have. So it's the 25-year anniversary, of Big Mind.
Yep.
99. So it's 25 years. So we're above teenage now. And we've been practicing shadow for 25 years. I've been practicing it for more like 40 years, but we've been practicing shadow work. And right now, the whole world needs shadow work. And I especially mean us, not them. They have their own shadows, but it's not them.
Well, we're their shadow.
We are their shadows. We are their shadows.
Yeah.
But they don't have to do the work. We do. If we do the work, that will happen. If we can really make the shift. I've been practicing this a lot with my wife. So wherever we see we're kind of polarized, that happens all the time, right? You naturally polarize in relationship. That's the whole family dynamic, I'm sure.
Yep.
We polarize. And so when I can find the polarization place, let's say I feel I'm full of anxiety and I'm full of fear and I'm worried all the time. And I look over at her and she's just peaceful and calm and collected, just nirvana, I have to be willing to give up my fear, or she has to be willing to give up her place of peace. Because it's more nice to be in that place than it is this place. And we have to keep shifting. So the moment one of us, and frankly, it's the one that has to go to the part that's uglier, and own that, then we both shift immediately. Sometimes I do it in our sleep, because I don't sleep, I sit. I sit all night, years. So I'm sitting and I'm doing this work, and then I wake up, she wakes up in the morning and she's already shifted. It is magical.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
we're at that place in the planet where if we, the so-called woke ones, the liberals, the Democrats, the Trumpers, that's me, right? If we can wake up to I am Trump, and I am the MAGA movement, and I am all that, and it's all within me, and yet come to the apex. We didn't get to that yet.
Yes.
The
Yes.
hope.
That'll be another
They have to go to Big
conversation for
Mind.
us.
Yeah, you can go to bigmind.org or Conzeon and get on there and watch some of these things that we didn't get to today.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
running out of time, I know. I think. Yeah. But at the apex, we're the whole, of course, because the apex is just a vision of being the whole. It's like yin yang.
Yep.
We are the whole. And then transformation happens. Then real transformation. And we're at a very exciting time. I don't think this is a negative time. We have to own that it's a negative time. There's positive. This is a real gift. This is a gift waiting 2,500 years and 2,000 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, the prophecies are all true. They all came true.
Here we
I'm going to
are.
say some things now that you can just cut out if you want to. Can I say something?
Yes, please.
Yeah. The Antichrist has been elected, and the Christ coming, the second coming, has been elected. He is the second coming. How could Christ come back as Christ? Christ came back as his opposite, his shadow. You see that? Christ was all about love, compassion, good. Yeah, all those good things. What was Christ's shadow? Donald Trump. He is Christ's shadow, and he's come back as a second coming, and it's ugly, and he's the Antichrist, and he's what allows us to drop our own ideas that this way was superior to this way.
It's like the big pendulum goes like this, and we have to go sit in the darkness of it.
We do have to be in the dark.
Yes.
Because the dark is the source.
Always.
The dark is the source. Not knowing is it. So we're ready. And so what I'm going to spend my time on is helping people see their shadows.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all. And I live here where I live. I'll show you where I live. Have you seen it? Can I show you?
I haven't recently.
No, you haven't seen it.
No, then I haven't.
Maybe others can see it. Okay, this is where I live.
Oh, yes. What part of the island is that?
Captain Cook. This is a plantation. It's called the Real McCoy Plantation.
Is it, you're on the east side of the island then?
Oh, west.
Oh, west. You're on the west side. Okay.
Yeah, west. Yeah, that's it.
Wow. I need to come visit you.
Yeah, absolutely. But this is what I'm going to be doing, sitting here and helping people. I do most of it by Zoom.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So I can work from here.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, Genpo, thank you for being here. Thank you for always, you bring both a very grounded perspective, and yet you invite us into this other perspective where the non-self perspective that is mind-boggling for the ego. And yet, having worked with you for almost 20 years, and I do this work too with clients, a lot of shadow work, and I know the power of it. And so the invitation for everyone to learn to sit with these parts of ourselves that we judge, that we deem bad, we deem evil, we deem
ugly,
not good, or the parts that despicable.
But that's the key to finding our own shadow. If we can find what we hate out there in another or others, that's our shadow.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you so much for gracing my new podcast. You were my first guest on my last one. You're my first guest on this one. And it's just so lovely to spend some time with you. And
no, thank you for having me. I just enjoyed it. And I hope I did okay.
Oh, you did great. Thank you.